Right, so it looks like no matter how desperate you might be to maintain control of your government, things are clearly cracking up for Benjamin Netanyahu right now, and not before time, karma and all of that. And it all comes down to what the eventual outcome for Gaza actually will be. Netanyahu cannot afford to let up on this war in Gaza that he has begun. In a bid seemingly to keep himself in power, he has led a 7-month-long and counting genocide in the Strip, all supposedly in retaliation for a one-night incursion by Hamas on the night of October 7th. Always massively disproportionate in response as it has been, and an ulterior motive has long been surmised for it. But with the ICJ now examining a plausible case for genocide against Israel, with arrest warrants potentially heading his way as well from the ICC, with the attacks coming from all around Israel militarily as well, from the likes of Lebanon to Iran to the Houthis in Yemen, causing economic damage too, relying on the bank of Uncle Sam for forever and a day, but that won't last forever. But when it comes to not at all hiding Israel's true intentions for Gaza, there are splits opening up in his government, because now this can of worms has been opened, this question has been asked: what is your vision for the future for Gaza, BB? How it gets closed there, how things end, and how things move on in Gaza in future, there is no agreement on. And this is why it is impossible to negotiate with Israel right now. With some absolute madmen who will never accept anything less than seizing Gaza for Israel and colonising it, something no country on earth, if you take them at their word at any rate, will allow. And to point to a perfect example of such a mad man, you only need to look at the loosest of Benjamin Netanyahu's ministerial canons, the Minister for Security, Itamar Ben Gvir, increasingly throwing his weight around in Netanyahu's government, making a speech no less demanding the colonisation of Gaza. Right, so Benjamin Netanyahu is becoming increasingly isolated even within his own government. Time after time he has given in to demands from the hard-right elements of his government in order to keep his coalition together. The only thing keeping him in power and out of jail, it seems, at this point. However, it isn't exclusively coming from the likes of Itamar Ben Gvir, but we will start with him anyway. We're becoming more and more familiar with this loudmouth in the press, even our Western media, and on our screens, Itamar Ben Gvir, the Minister for Security and leader of the far-right party Otzma Yehudit, an extremist, ultra-nationalist party, utterly anti-Arab. It is a racist, Jewish supremacist party, and Netanyahu chose to go into coalition with that for the sake of taking back power. There's no limits, it seems, therefore, to what he's prepared to do to be Prime Minister, to be in control. But keeping such god-awful people happy in order to keep the coalition together has been an epic act of juggling, and for as much as you might do things, awful things, to placate people like him, in doing so you end up losing support elsewhere, and that is what we're finally starting to see. 3 days ago was Israel Memorial Day, the anniversary of the state's founding on the 14th of May 1948. The speeches were given by both Netanyahu and Ben Gvir. But where Netanyahu found himself heckled by those opposed to what he was doing, one man apparently shouting at him that he was garbage and saying that Netanyahu killed his children. But Ben Gvir picked his audience perhaps a little better, because he chose to attend, well, his fan club. He chose to address those who seem to worship the ground that he walks on. He chose to attend a rally held by the Nahala movement, hard-right Israeli settlers that I've spoken about in other videos, and they're led by a woman called Daniela Weiss, quite the Israeli name there. But what do you expect when your parents came from the US and Poland? She was actually born Palestinian for all of her devotion to Israel, because, well, Israel didn't exist at the point she was born. So she's a bit of a walking hypocrisy there as well, really. Anyway, Ben Gvir was treated to a hero's welcome by Nahala, as he always is, and told them absolutely what they wanted to hear.
צהריים טובים עם ישראל. אתם יודעים, בן שלי כשבאתי לצאת אמר לי, אבא, אתה עם 3 צלעות שבורות. הרופא אמר לי, תנוח. מה אתה יוצא? מה אתה? למה אתה? סכן את עצמך. ואמרתי לו, שובאל, אני יוצא, כי העצרת כאן היא הפתרון. הפתרון שאומרים כאן זה הפתרון ואין בלתו. אנחנו בקבינט מתעסקים ודורשים מלחמה עכשיו, דורשים להיכנס לרפיח, דורשים סיכונים ממוקדים, אבל צריך לומר את האמת בלי לשחרר, כתוב כאן לכבוש, גם לכבוש זה לא רע, אבל בלי לשחרר את עזה לא יהיה פתרון.
3 broken ribs from a recent car accident, in case you weren't aware of that reference, but stood behind a podium reading, "Colonisation in Gaza will bring security. Returning home" is saying the quiet part out loud. Go into Rafah, commit assassinations, all received to rapturous applause. Gaza was, up until 2005, settled by Israelis there. There were some 21 settlements there. We know Nahala want them restored. We know they want to build more. We know they want the Palestinians removed from Gaza and it to be assimilated into the Israeli state. Daniela Weiss herself thinks Ireland would be a nice place for the Gaza people to be moved to, for example. Ben Gvir didn't get everything his own way, though. His speech to settlers in Sderot might have gone down very well, but when he travelled to Ashdod, he was pointed at by a woman and called a criminal, which his rhetoric and the actions he's not only sanctioned but celebrated absolutely are. It's not just from his far-right coalition partners that Netanyahu is struggling, though. It's happening with his closer ministers as well. Take his defence minister, Yoav Gallant, always a happy-looking chap, the permanent expression giving off he who smelt it dealt it vibes. He, like Netanyahu, is one of the 3 Israeli figures who are allegedly facing arrest warrants from the International Criminal Court. And whether this has prompted a swipe at his boss or his boss's motivations, plans, very uncharacteristically or not, I don't know, but it could be. He's also sick of the hard right dictating to the boss, and the boss jumping every time they do. That threat of collapsing the government always on the table from them. This is a guy in Netanyahu's own liquid party, so are the cracks happening not just in the Israeli government, as unstable as it is, this was always a distinct possibility, but is it actually happening inside Netanyahu's own party as well? So what's he said then, Damo? Well, in light of Ben Gvir's comments, it seems a line has been drawn by Gallant, and it adds weight to the thinking that what Ben Gvir was saying might actually be the plan, or certainly one that's under serious consideration, because Gallant has said under no circumstances would he set up a military government to run Gaza. It seems there might actually be no plan right now at all for what happens afterwards, and this appears to be coming as a surprise to some Israeli ministers. But as has been said by me and many other commentators by now, Netanyahu really cannot afford for this to stop. Gallant wants to know what happens when they've eliminated Hamas. Ben Gvir has said what he wants. Gallant has said he's not having a bar of that, though. Netanyahu seems undecided. How does he weasel out of this one? Well, it gets worse for him. 2 other ministers, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, have come out in support for Gallant on this point, and they too come from another coalition party, National Unity. So that's another potential whole party that could fracture away if Netanyahu gives in to Ben Gvir. Worsening the situation further is that Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has come down on the side of Ben Gvir. He's also far-right, so no surprise there really, but he heads yet another coalition party, the Religious Zionist Party. So you have all these different coalition parties. Netanyahu has been able to hold 7 separate parties together to keep himself in power, and more it is looking impossible for that to be sustainable. And it gets even worse for him from here. Ben Gvir has popped up again now, demanding that Netanyahu fire Gallant over what he's been saying, and saying that he must be replaced to achieve the war's goals. What are the goals? Netanyahu doesn't even seem to know anymore. And more often than not, it is what Ben Gvir or those like him say that goes anyway. Ben Gvir has said, "From Gallant's point of view, there is no difference between whether Gaza is controlled by IDF soldiers or whether Hamas murderers control it. This is the essence of the conception of a defence minister who failed on October 7th and continues to fail even now. Such a defence minister must be replaced in order to achieve the goals of the war." Will Netanyahu therefore sack a member of his own party in government to placate a coalition partner who will probably threaten to collapse the government yet again if he doesn't get his way? This government is totally unsustainable, and it looks like it could be reaching a point of no return. The government in Israel could potentially collapse before anything changes in Gaza. Of course, Israeli plans for the seizure of Gaza are nothing new. The plans to do it were drawn up years ago, it turned out. And now the person who actually drew them up is in a position to enact them too, as this video recommendation will tell you all about if things go that far. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.